So thank you. Also, I wanted to remind everybody, if you know a student who might be a good candidate for the Rotary Youth Leadership opportunity at KU, please reach out to them. This is a wonderful leadership opportunity, and it's kept on campus. And there's been some fun happening in the last week on campus. So, and some in New Orleans. But please, if you know students who are eligible, reach out to them, because we're growing our next generation of leaders, and we're able to do that through the Rotary Youth Leadership Award. And there are applications at the check-in table, and there are flyers. And I'm going to push it out to some of the counselors I know at the school districts, but if you know a student, we definitely want to make that happen. We have had a anonymous club member also be able to also give us some additional funds, so we can fund some additional students. So, and I have heard it's life-changing for a number of the students. So those are all my announcements. I am going to turn this over to Vince to introduce our speaker today.
Sure.
Oh, Joan. Yes, Karen.
You did an update on Yana.
I did. Yes. I'm not sure where she is. The last time I saw her, she was picking up people in Tijuana.
She's in Tijuana. Both parties have arrived. They just got moved to the refugee camp this morning, and they're hoping to get them out this afternoon and come to the U.S.
Very good. Very good. It's been fun watching the journey. Joan, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you. That's all right.
It's my privilege today to be able to introduce to you Jennifer Montgomery. Jennifer has served as the Director of Human Trafficking Education and Outreach in the Office of the Attorney General since 2013, and currently she chairs the Kansas Human Trafficking Advisory Board. We've known her because of our involvement with human trafficking over the last 3 years with our signature grant. Jennifer is a humanitarian, an author, a visual artist, and a global human rights advocate. She's also a fourth-generation Kansan and a former legislative staff for the Kansas Congressional Delegation in Washington, D.C. She was recently chosen from a pool of global candidates as a Rotary International Peace Fellow at Montgomery University in Kampala, Uganda. Jennifer is deeply committed to helping others transform conflict into avenues for peace and reconciliation in communities in Kansas and across the globe. She is not currently a Rotarian, and she can't join a club until she finishes her fellowship, but you all should not hesitate to offer her an invitation as soon as that is done. It's our pleasure to hear about Rotary's Peace Initiative from a Peace Fellow, Jennifer Montgomery.
Thank you very much, Joan, for the kind introduction, and thank you, Melissa, for the invitation to come and speak to your club today. I know many of you have met several of you before in the past, and I believe I addressed this group when you were in a different meeting location probably 4 or 5 years ago on the topic of human trafficking, talking about the work I do in the Attorney General's office. So I'm really pleased to be back, and I'm really excited, I have to say, to be here to talk to you about my Rotary Peace Fellowship and the work that I'm doing connected to that currently and my plans for the future. As you noticed, there's a little flyer on your table that goes into some more detail about the big initiative that's coming out of my fellowship. Wanted to leave something with you today. So I'm going to be talking to you about that today. I am in the middle of my Rotary Peace Fellowship. So not only are you talking to a Peace Fellow, you're talking to a live Peace Fellow, someone who's in the middle of their fellowship. I just returned in December from Uganda. Our trip was cut a couple of weeks short due to the emergence of the Omicron variant. We were asked to head back soon. So we did come back a few weeks early, but I spent 2.5 months in Uganda living on the campus there at the university, and I will be going back in October to present my final project to the university there and the peace community at a symposium. So let's jump right in. Makerere University is in Kampala, Uganda, which is the capital of Uganda. The university is up on a hill looking over the city. I don't know how much you all know about this part of Africa. It's in East Africa. And Kampala itself is a very urban area, very heavily congested, serious air quality issues. That was probably one of my biggest challenges while I was there because I have fairly severe asthma. So I did struggle with some of that. But fortunately, the campus was up on a hill, beautiful campus. Some facts about Uganda, very large population. The actual size of Uganda is the same as the state of Oregon. It has the world's second youngest population. So think about that. The population of Uganda, many of them are under the age of 25. And just children being born every second of every day there. There's a lot of poverty in Uganda, lack of educational opportunities, especially for women, and that's the focus of my projects that I will tell you about. Lack of healthcare and other economic opportunities. During COVID, the schools were closed in Uganda for 2 full years. They just opened this past January. That is the longest anywhere in the world to have closure. And I saw these kids out in the streets, in some of the slum areas that we spent time in, with really not much to do. And because of that, there was an absolute explosion of child and teen pregnancy. Again, one of the issues that I'm tackling with some of my initiatives. The other interesting fact about Uganda is it's one of the largest refugee hosts in the world. Again, that sort of colors the population of this country. A lot of folks with a lot of challenges. There we go. Montgomery Flats, boy, good times. That is where we lived for the duration of our fellowship. It is an apartment complex on campus. It's been renovated, as they say. Interesting definition of renovation. It was fairly modern, but unfortunately our apartment number 8, had some sort of problem with the water pipe. And my roommate and I, who was from Finland, were without running water, reliable running water, for 4 weeks of our fellowship. So you can imagine the other challenges that caused. I was ready to rough it. I knew that the conditions were different because I've actually traveled in Africa before and done mission work in Rwanda, which is just the neighbor to the south. But I was not prepared for trying to navigate classroom study without water, travel, field study. It was quite a challenge. The photo in the upper right is of my host Rotarian and her family. She was fantastic, really excellent woman, very well-spoken, well-educated woman who has a PhD and works at Makerere University in the Department of Education. The other photo is of all of the fellows. We were 18 fellows from 11 countries. There were 2 other Americans in our group and 2 from Europe, but the rest were from various African countries. So that was very interesting and really had a lot of lively conversation. We shared views on topics that were going on. It was really quite an interesting experience. Having some issues with the clicker here. Don't know why. Can someone advance my slide? I think you can just use the arrow, maybe. Oh, it didn't work? Well, I hate to lose the time, so I guess I could try to speak to you about some of this without slides guiding me, but I don't want to lose the time we have. So if that gets going, I will pick up where that left off. I presented this to one other Rotary group in the area, so I think I know what comes next. I will try. Part of the Rotary Peace Fellowship is to study at a university at their Peace Center. The Peace Center at Makerere University in Uganda is the newest Rotary Peace Center. And because of that, there were definitely some hiccups and learning experiences that I feel like could use some work for the next cohorts. I do know that they've welcomed their third group already last month. We were the second cohort at this Peace Center. So you can imagine that they're new and they were trying out some things. And I think that it will be very useful for them to get some evaluation from Peace Fellows on some of the ways maybe they can improve the actual scheduling. There we go. Some of the highlights of the fellowship was our field study trip to Rwanda. As I mentioned, I'd been to Rwanda in the past. I had worked with some folks in the Catholic Church there on training peace builders, missionaries on trauma. That is kind of my area of expertise. So I had traveled there and been involved in community peace building. So I was very excited to go back to Rwanda. It's an incredible country. This is a photo of Kigali. These are some photos of the Peace Fellows. We took a bus. That was an adventure. Driving, it was supposed to be a 10-hour trip, and it was more like a 22-hour trip. Yes, and we had some very interesting experiences at the border. The land border was not open to the public, but we had to get special permission from the president of Rwanda himself to let us pass, and it was quite an experience. But it was a really good experience. I've studied a lot about the genocide, so I was pleased to actually go to some of the more rural genocide memorials, not just the big museum in Kigali, but we were able to visit them, and they were very, very meaningful experiences for all of us. I don't know if it's the clicker or what's going on. No. From the way you did earlier here. Do you think that might do it? Sounds like it would work, doesn't it? Let's see if we can. Yeah, I don't know. What? All right, well, let's see if we can go. There we go. What is going on here? Another great place that we visited on our trip back from Rwanda, as I mentioned, that bus trip was so long, a few of us decided we wanted to get off at the border and go and have a weekend to recoup. So we went to Lake Bunyoni in Kabale, Uganda. You can see it's a beautiful place. We were able to see some really great animals and have a few days to recover from our field study. Some other key meetings and visits that I had during the fellowship were visits to the slums, the urban slums in the Kampala area. I had originally applied to this Peace Fellowship program with a project to do arts-based trauma recovery work with victims of sexual violence, refugees, other large conflicts. And my site was going to be a children's home on the border between Kenya and Uganda. After spending quite a bit of time in the slums in Kampala, I changed my program site. And now I am actually working with women who are residents of urban slums. It was just incredible, some of the things I saw. I also had the great fortune to visit with a Ugandan Supreme Court justice who I had met. We were co-presenters at an international human trafficking conference in 2019 in Puerto Rico. He had gone on to become a Supreme Court justice since that time. So I looked him up and he invited me over to his chambers, and that was a very interesting experience. I spoke with some folks in some of the community spaces. That's a pub there that they had. We were drinking sorghum, which is their national drink. And I also was able to sit down with the American staff of the U.S. Human Trafficking Institute, who is embedded with the prosecutor there to go after child sex crimes and trafficking. And that was, again, a great experience. Some of the other challenges besides the water that I mentioned to you, if you were watching the news, the international news during that time I was away last fall, we had multiple terrorism incidents that were occurring in Kampala. And this is really not common for Uganda. That is not an area of Africa that gets frequent terrorism. So it was sort of a surprise. I was not prepared for that, but we were kind of locked down on campus during a lot of the time, which we normally would not have been. Some of the other challenges were the lack of psychosocial support for citizens in that country. And again, that's what I'm tailoring my work in Uganda to support victims of all kinds of conflict and trauma. And then, of course, just the traffic that I mentioned, the congestion. Some of the underlying issues that concerned me while I was there that really have informed my work since I've been back, dealing with just the poor infrastructure, very underdeveloped country. Again, since I had traveled several times to Rwanda right next door, I was expecting more development. Not the case. Very underdeveloped country compared to some of the other countries nearby. Crippling poverty, I mentioned lack of economic and educational opportunities for women and girls, some environmental issues. You can see this was a photo I took in one of the villages where children just play in these trash dumps. Climate change is an issue everyone's talking about. Certainly, climate change has a compounded effect on vulnerable communities and vulnerable people. And I certainly saw that firsthand. And then really the harmful gender and cultural norms. It's a very patriarchal society. And that was just frustrating, interesting to learn about. I made some incredible connections with Ugandan women while I was there. And some of the projects that I was involved in during my fellowship, we went to a local village on the Rotary Polio Day event, and I was able to help distribute new mother kits to the pregnant women in the village. That was really interesting. I mentioned some of the projects and how they've become informed on the gender issue. One of the requirements for the fellowship is that we write a 20-page research paper for publication in an academic journal. My paper I just completed 2 weeks ago, and it really looks at women and girls living in this particular slum called Kisenyi in central Kampala. How they're at very high risk for violence, especially sexual violence. They're really a vulnerable population. And that's because of the way things are done in that particular slum. And like I said, some of the lack of opportunities and vulnerabilities for females. My social change initiative, which is the big project for the fellowship. I told you I applied with one idea. And I am taking that idea and applying it to the populations in these urban slums. So I'm going to be doing a sexual violence prevention training with members, residents of the slums. And I'm working with some interns at a community organization there as a partner. They're going to be actually implementing it over the summer after I put it together, and we're going to survey pre and post. And then phase 2 of this initiative will be when I go back to Uganda. I'm going to be sitting down with the women who work in the brothel in this slum. And we're going to be doing some processing of trauma through arts-based curriculum. That, again, is kind of my area of expertise as an artist. I'm also a professional artist. I'm also a survivor of sexual gender-based violence. And so for me, these things go hand in hand. That is always how I've been able to navigate life after that kind of experience. So I have a curriculum that I've developed, and I will be working with these very vulnerable women on this issue, and hopefully helping them become recovered to a point where they can take part in the vocational skills training program that is available to them in the slum. Many of them have tried to go through this 6-month program, but have not been able to complete it due to the trauma. So I'm hoping I can help them so then they can choose a profession. They're tailoring, cosmetology, IT, or some of baking, some of the opportunities they have for $42 a person. Unbelievable to me. I can send one of these women through that program. So that's kind of the longer term strategy for that project. This is the community-based organization that I will be partnering with to execute this initiative. The other large project that's come out of my fellowship, as I said, what I saw on the ground was women and girls without any type of hope or opportunity. Many of them become pregnant early. Post-COVID, this has become an enormous problem, really, really enormous problem. So I mentioned to you that I had met several really inspiring and impressive Ugandan women while I was there. One of them was another fellow in my cohort. She is a gender specialist and works with a nonprofit on the ground in Uganda. She's Ugandan. The other two were, one was my host Rotarian that I mentioned, who has a PhD in education at the university. And the other is a woman who heard me speak at one of these local events and came up and told me some of the things she's noticed there that are problems. She is a lecturer at Kampala International University there in Uganda. So between the four of us, we came up with this idea to start a nonprofit organization. I just completed our state registration here in Kansas this week, and we are having our first board meeting this afternoon. So it's very exciting. It's called Magenta Girls Initiative. The focus of this organization is really going to be supporting at-risk women and girls, keeping them in school, providing trauma recovery through that arts-based curriculum that I mentioned. And if you looked on the flyers, our ultimate goal is to raise the funds to start a community environment, a physical location. It can be a school or an after-school program where we can provide all the supports that girls need to finish their education and then be able to go on either to university or to some sort of vocational skill. Girls in Uganda have all kinds of challenges. Many of them are forced to take care of their younger siblings, to carry water, to do other types of chores. Once they become pregnant early, many times the families withdraw their financial support for those girls to continue their education. This can be in grade school, in middle school, in high school, and so on. So it's very important that we educate parents why education for girls, letting them go back and continuing to pay those fees is so important. Our organization will be offering scholarships to pay the school fees for very vulnerable girls in the rural Ugandan villages. We're going to create a mentorship program with professional women like the two partners I have there. We're going to recruit very influential and educated women who are Ugandan to become mentors for these girls in our program. And then we're going to provide the supports, including the trauma recovery. More than 1/3 of Ugandan women are illiterate. So there are critical gender disparities between men and women in Uganda. Very high levels of sexual violence and other forms of violence as well, especially in rural villages and these urban slums. My dream had always been to work with at-risk girls and women in Africa. And this is really an incredible opportunity that came out of this Rotary Peace Fellowship. Whenever I speak to groups of Rotarians, I always say, first and foremost, thank you. Thank you for supporting the Rotary Peace Fellowship, and thank you for being willing to provide global grants and partner with other programs and opportunities for these programs that come out of these peace fellowships. They're very important, especially when we're talking about underdeveloped parts of our world. I mentioned some of the other risks to girls. Obviously, in my professional work, I have a real focus on human trafficking, sexual gender-based violence, sexual assault, child abuse, etc. There are some other issues that occur at higher rates in places like Uganda than, for example, in our country or other more developed African countries, such as female genital mutilation. It's a very difficult topic to talk about, but culturally it's going on in these villages in Uganda. And then, of course, early marriage is also something that we really want to educate adults, parents, and others in these communities on why they need to invest in girls. It's really important. Girls make up a huge part of the population. Again, as I mentioned, our focus is to identify, enroll, and retain at-risk girls in school and support them in multiple ways. Some of our objectives here, we really want to break the generational cycle of poverty that you can see in many African countries, but honestly, in all of my work, I've not seen to the level that I saw when I was in Uganda. My hope is to get this organization funded at a level that I can hire the other fellow that I told you, my partner, who's a fellow from my cohort and is Ugandan. She's agreed to leave her current job and take on the program manager role for Magenta Girls Initiative as soon as I can raise the funds. So I am the person who is currently the board president and responsible for the fundraising on the US side. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on now. On the sheet, you can see we've got $65,000 as our target to start up this organization and get the programming rolling, to hire her as the primary staff person. And then we have different phases where we can add services and reach to this particular project. As I mentioned, if we are going to see real development in the world, we need to invest in women. Really important. This was a group of women that I was really privileged to be able to have lunch and be the featured speaker. It was women who have been recently divorced in Uganda and who are single mothers. I've also experienced that in my lifetime, so I have a lot of insight to share on that topic. And it was a great opportunity to really get to know people who live there and who are business owners and who are professionals in Uganda. So this is my contact information. If you're interested, please take one of the flyers I left on your table. If you'd like to learn more about this effort and what we are working on, please reach out. And I will close by telling you about this young man in this photo with me. One of the many impressive and interesting Ugandans I met. He's actually Congolese. He's a refugee. He's been living in Uganda for 7 years with his mother and his younger siblings. His name is Blaze. He was my driver. And the first time we met, he asked if I would be willing to help him fill out his application to Columbia University in New York City for a master's degree program in peace and conflict resolution. To me, I thought, God is speaking. This is incredible. So I said, well, let me take a look at that. So we went to a hotspot and looked at that. Long story short, he is now my fourth child. He's 28 years old. He's struggling in Uganda. He's selling dried fish on the road. That is what he is doing in order to support his mother and his younger siblings. He wants to get into Columbia to advance his education and to give him more opportunities. I was happy to edit and look over his essays to help him with the application. And he was interviewed by the program on Monday of this week. They actually granted him an interview. And now we just wait and cross our fingers that he gets accepted. It's a full ride scholarship to an Ivy League school in the United States for refugees. And I'm just amazed at how this has progressed. And this is potentially a reality for this young man. I'm in touch with him daily. He sends me messages or we have phone calls, and I've really taken on he and his family and tried to support them in any way I can. So he's very anxious for me to return in October. I can tell you that for sure. So with that, I will close and again say thank you so much for the opportunity to share this with you all today. As you can see, I'm very excited about it, very hopeful that we can do some real good in this part of the world. And I don't know if there's time for questions. Yes. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Yes.
I'd like to know what the percentage of Muslims were in that.
Percentage of Muslims in Uganda. Oh, the FGM. I think the percentage is under 10%. I can't say specifically what it is. The largest religious groups there are Catholic and Protestant Christianity. And then there are Muslims, and there are also some other religions that are less known there. Yeah. Well, yeah, good. He asked about Uganda and their governance structure. I will tell you, it's interesting over there. Having spent a lot of time in Rwanda which of course, President Paul Kagame, long history there of why he's president and how he became president post-genocide. That country runs well in terms of how it functions. Uganda is not quite like that. The interesting thing about their governance, the current president, Museveni, has been in power for 30 years. He came after, he was post-Idi Amin in the 1970s. The interesting tidbit about Uganda and their government is that they have never had a peaceful transfer of power. That's mind-blowing, right? They have always had a coup or someone has died or been forced out or something like that. They have never had, they do have elections, of course, but you know, they may not look like elections that we have here in our country, but yeah, they've never had a peaceful transfer of power. And I will tell you, in speaking with a lot of the youth in that country, in the slums and other places, because that population is so large and rising, they better start listening to the youth in that country because they are passionate, they are educated, they are very, very interested in being participants in the way that country is run. And I think it's sort of a powder keg. It's a great question. Other questions?
So on the Rwandan side, has the reconciliation been real or is it token?
Yeah.
Tutsis integrated back into real world?
Yeah, he asked about the integration between Tutsi and Hutu. Like I mentioned, I've spent a lot of time in Rwanda, especially with victims of trauma, many of them trauma from the genocide, either themselves or their family members were killed. I can say that country to me is one of the most unique environments I have ever been. There is an air of reverence when you arrive there. People are cautiously friendly. They are integrated for the most part. They have done such a good job. There's an organization called Never Again Rwanda, and their entire goal is to prevent genocide again, because the genocide in 1994 was not the first genocide in Rwanda. A lot of people don't know that. There's a history there. So that organization has really done work on society and community members on being peaceful and the role of peace. And you can feel it when you're there. It's one of my favorite places on earth. It's just a lovely place to be, and the people are really incredible. And I will tell you, I actually have several partners there who are wanting to be part of our Magenta Girls initiative. And that's why we say Uganda, but Africa and beyond, because we have plans to extend this initiative after it gets going to Rwanda next and maybe some other countries. So that's my hope. Other questions? If not, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Jennifer, that was amazing. Thank you so much. So much of what we're talking about right now kind of has a little bit of a theme, because we were talking about Yana and the Ukraine and working with refugees, and then what you were talking about is really kind of the most vulnerable people and bolstering them and refugees and opportunity that you have in America. So I feel like this really ties in well together. Our next meeting is April 14th, and it will be Regina Platt from the YWCA. She will speak about the Stand Against Racism Community Challenge. You just sign up and are learning with the Topeka and Shawnee County community as we do the 21-day challenge, because it's pretty amazing and powerful and self-directed, so you can do it at your pace. Do we have any other announcements? Okay, very good. Ben, it's wonderful to meet you, and I'm so happy you're considering joining. Danae, it's wonderful that you were able to join, and we're looking forward to great things with our club. And so let's stand for the four-way test. Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it bid goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Will it be fun and kind? I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week. Look for my survey. Thank you. I agree. It takes two of you.
The section right into so we were lower pretty high. So, yeah.